10th World Trade Organization's ministerial conference kicked off in Kenya's capital, Nairobi, with concerns over whether a trade deal will be agreed on. Key issues on the table include agricultural subsidies by developed countries, environmental goods agreement, and the expansion of a $1.3 trillion information technology deal. Now, intellectual property is also another area featuring in the discussions. The Geneva-based WTO has been trying to agree on a worldwide package of trade reforms since a meeting in Doha in 2001 hatched a plan to knock down trade barriers. Since then, the WTO has still managed to agree on a few changes to the global trading rules, but still a stalemate exists over other matters.
The hope for millions of people in increasing prosperity on the basis of trade and exchange is in your hands. The outcome of this meeting can positively touch on many other pressing challenges, such as insecurity, instability, and inequality. It is therefore my earnest encouragement to all negotiating teams represented here today to seize this particular moment. Reach for mutually beneficial compromise and allow yourselves no result except success.
If the rules-based multilateral trading system did not exist, we collectively would have to create it. If it fails because of leadership deficits and inability to make rational choices, we would have to recreate it. Your Excellencies, apart from a weak global economy, still dealing with the aftershocks of the global financial and economic crisis, we are faced with the risk of trade and economic fragmentation. Variable regional trading arrangements are useful and can generate welfare effects. They are complements to trade multilateralism. They are not substitutes.
We took 18 years to deliver our first multilateral agreement in Bali. That's way too long. We can't wait another 18 years to deliver again.
All right, so the World Trade Organization 10th Ministerial Conference, the first ever hosted in sub-Saharan Africa, kicked off in Nairobi today. But as ministers and stakeholders start negotiations, questions around whether they will be able to emerge with practical solutions at this stage remain amid deep divides across the membership. Repeated setbacks in the Doha round trade negotiations continue to loom over talks. This time around, the stakes have changed as the global trade landscape transforms. Uche Okoronko spoke to the chief executive of the International Center for Trade and Sustainable Development, Ricardo Melendez, about the realities on the ground this time around.
We have this existentialist question of the make or break, which means really, do we abandon the Doha round of negotiations that were started in 2001, or do we continue with that Doha round? If countries decide to scrap, as it's been now said, that they have been called to abandon the Doha round of negotiations, then that should provide an opportunity to actually bring those new issues to the table. So from the African perspective, it should be an opportunity for good, sound, solid strategic thinking of what a new agenda for sustainability should be going forward.
Now, there's a lot of uncertainty in terms of whether we'll see a settlement on a worldwide package of trade reforms. In fact, many are saying that this is a make or break situation. Now, what are your views? Do you think that we'll see a groundbreaking agreement this time around? And what do you think are going to be the key issues that will come to the fore?
There's one of the issues regarding subsidies that it's in question here for Nairobi. It regards export subsidies in agricultural products. It's an important topic for Africa. It is about food aid in kind, export credit guarantees, and those kind of things. But it's also important to put it into context. Those export subsidies were disruptive of global markets back in 2001 in a major manner. At that time, the European Union provided about $10 billion in subsidies. Today, those numbers are in the millions of dollars. So it's been scaled down in a tremendous manner. It doesn't mean that they're not still a problem. particularly this question of food aid in kind, which disrupts local markets. And it's very important for Africa. So what we know is that there is basically an agreement to do something about it.
What is your outlook in terms of revolutionizing the way we trade? And are you optimistic about us reaching a real good agreement for everyone this time around?
Whatever is decided here, they need the WTO members to agree to other approaches to try to address the problems and the futures of the global economy of today. And that's what I think is revolutionizing in a way. We now know much better how the world is working in the 21st century, what is the role of digital technologies. We have some idea of what's necessary in terms of the frameworks to address those digital technologies. The WTO members are way behind in developing really the disciplines and the frameworks for that world.
Let's now expand this conversation further. Uche Okoronko joins us now live from the venue of the WTO talks here in Nairobi. Uche, it is the first time a WTO ministerial conference comes to Africa. How significant are these trade talks for the continent?
Well, thanks, Penina. And of course, the MC10, as it's commonly referred to here on ground, took off today with President Uhuru Kenyatta and, of course, Liberia's President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf effectively kicking off the conference today afternoon. Now, one of the major issues for this conference when we talk about Africa is the fact that it's taking place on our home turf, which, of course, is increasing the hope that Africa will have more influence on the talks that are taking place here in Nairobi. Another issue is some of the key issues Africa wants to see solved or addressed during this conference, of course, is the agricultural subsidies. They would like to see those being revoked. They also would like to see fairer policies in terms of trade barriers, of course, a greater environment for global trading, and of course, greater competitiveness that will include the least developed countries and, of course, developing countries as well. Now, one of the most important parts, or one of the most interesting parts of today is when we saw this morning Kenya's Minister of International Trade and Foreign Affairs, Amina Mohamed, effectively challenging the World Trade Organization and the ministers on ground, telling them that developing countries are growing impatient with a lack of progress when it comes to talks. And of course, she also challenged them that this time around, they would like to see the WTO tackle the challenges on ground, or effectively scrap its role as a negotiator, or its function as a negotiator during this talk. So a lot of high stakes this time around, Penina. Of course, the Doha round of talks is one of the major issues affecting or sort of hampering the discussions on ground. A lot of differences between rich and poor countries. The rich countries effectively believe that the Doha round of talks is dead, and with the current global environment, they believe we should move forward, while developing countries, or the least developed countries, are hoping to see commitments from the Doha round of talks. And of course, interesting to mention the Doha round of talks actually took place in 2001, so that's almost 15 years ago. In 2009, they tried to push those talks forward, but unfortunately no agreement between rich and poor countries. Also in Geneva, before this talks, negotiators tried to come up with a draft, a document for ministers, or agree on a draft document for ministers. And in fact, they didn't come up with anything. So what we're seeing here is ministers on ground are working with quite a messy document. President Uhuru effectively says he wants to see us come up with agreement this time around, but realistically, not a lot of optimism that we're going to see some of those deals come to fruition during this event. Now, I'm actually joined by Laila Macharia. She's actually one of the delegates at the conference and the vice chairman of the Kenya Private Sector Alliance. Laila, great to have you with me on the show. Now, what is Kenya's private sector looking to hear or find out about these talks. What are you looking in terms of outcomes? What are you looking for?
Oh, thank you very much. It's great to be here. The first thing is that it's great for us to underline that it's a very important and exciting thing that this meeting is being held here today. It's a great vote of confidence in Africa. It's a great vote of confidence in Kenya. We're looking to see a boost for tourism with all these people staying in hotels, spending here, seeing our wonderful environment, the flora, the fauna, and getting to know our people. We think it'll send a great message to the world in general. But in addition to that, at a substantive level, we're hoping to see some results out of the negotiations that are coming out. As you have said, Kenya especially, and Africa at large, is very concerned because agriculture is such an important part of our economies. Over 70% of our people are somehow employed through agriculture, make their living out of agriculture. And for Kenya, agriculture is a very important source of foreign exchange, our tea, our coffee, and our horticulture. So when you see that the prices on the global market are being affected by the fact that richer countries are subsidizing their agricultural sectors, whether it's cotton, whether it's fisheries, all the different areas that we have, when agro-processing is supposed to become a much more important factor in our industrialization plan, we're very concerned about that. We'd like to see that changed. We also want to see more of an emphasis on improving the reduction in duties for the non-agricultural programs, for the non-agricultural goods, our manufactured goods. The thing with Kenya is that our manufacturing sector is still at around 10% of our GDP. It has stayed at that level for the last decade. We're very concerned about this, but we have an aggressive and progressive and exciting industrialization plan. So we want to see these global markets open up and give us a level playing field for our goods to come in. Finally, we'd like to see an incentive in those global markets in making sure that they're not increasing tariffs as we add value to our goods. Our coffee, our tea now is still being exported. 80% of our tea is still unprocessed. And so we are getting a much bigger emphasis locally on improving value on the ground. So we would like to make sure that the import regimes internationally are not penalizing us for that.
Well, thank you so much, Laila Macharia. Now, one other thing to note is that this time around we'll see Liberia actually formally being adopted into the World Trade Organization, which is a major thing for the country, which of course is still recovering from the economic toll of the Ebola epidemic. So that's one of the major things that will be taking place actually tomorrow. Well, thanks so much. Back to you, Pim.
Thank you, Uche Okoronko, of course, giving us the highlights of today, which was the opening of the World Trade Organization 10th ministerial meeting here in Nairobi.